Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Road to 2000. As always, my name is Caleb Denby, and I will be your driver on this journey. Tonight, I wanted to go over yet another one or two of my games, this time from the Wright St. Louis Open that actually just took place right here at the Chess Club. It was an exciting event. There were some huge twists in the final round. I was actually in joint first going into the last round, and then both myself and the other leader lost in the last round and ended up sharing second place instead of first place. So sad ending to a fun tournament, but I wanted to go over one or two of those games here because I felt that there was quite a bit to learn from. So to start with, I actually want to go over this game that I played against Vinee, Thatiparthi. So he has been coming to the chess club for quite a few years here. He's around 1900, and I wanted to take a look at some of the mistakes he's making at that 1900 level that made this game not quite go his way. So jumping into it here, the game started with d4, d5, c4, e6, knight c3. So far a normal Queen's Gambit declines. And then Vinee chose to play this move c5. So are you familiar with this move c5? Has anyone seen c5 before? Yep, Steven. Vinee's 1900 USCF or so. Sometimes he's a bit more, sometimes a bit less. I don't think he's ever crossed 2000 though. c5 looks familiar. So what is c5 all about? Maybe you can tell me, what is Black trying to do with this move c5? Any ideas? Yeah, so he's basically doing what White was doing in the opening, right? White plays c4 to try to trade off the c pawn for a center pawn and give yourself a central majority. So Black is responding very much in kind as quickly and directly as possible. And as someone in the chat points out, this is actually called the Tarrasch, one of the openings named after Tarrasch. So it seems like this opening has a lot of upsides for Black, right? You know, there's no waiting around in a QGD where you're going to end up going c6 first and only c5 later, maybe, or there's no allowing for a minority attack in normal Carlsbad structure. Instead, what Black is going for is immediate trades in the center and immediate ways to try and equalize. So if White isn't careful, if White just plays sort of normal looking moves like knight f3, say knight c6 and e3, say knight f6, and like bishop e2 or something, you might find yourself in a position where Black has gotten a favorable IQP, right? Black immediately trades off those c pawns and d pawns, gives White this isolated queen pawn, and in this particular instance is going to have a good setup against it, right? He can maybe play knight b4 at some point, bring this knight to d5, just a good solid setup against an IQP for Black. So that's the dream for Black, but unfortunately c5 comes at a cost, which is Black is a little bit underdeveloped. And since Black hasn't developed much, it's going to be tough to keep track of everything going on in the center here, right? So to start with, I took on d5. We got e takes d5, and then I did just respond with knight to f3. And now, rather than White being left with the IQP, if Black tries to take on d4, we just take back. And this is going to be a very, very good IQP position for White because, number one, we have two pieces developed and Black has none. Number two, we're already well blockading the pawn, attacking the pawn. We're in good position to maybe even go g3, add more attackers to this pawn. And Black is going to have to really babysit this guy for a while. So instead, Black plays knight f6, sort of anticipating this kind of structure by defending this pawn a little bit more closely. And then there's a few ways that you can develop out here. Knight f6 is actually not the most common move, I think, because this move bishop g5 might be very, very strong. Instead, normally they go knight c6 here, not allowing you to pin the knight. I was out of theory, though, so I just stuck with some normal-looking moves, and I played this move e3 here. So what do you guys think about this move e3? Normally, someone might try to tell you that this move is incorrect. So Why is that? What's going on here?
Feels like it traps the dark square bishop.
Right. This is the principle that we learn when we're first learning openings, especially in queen's pawn openings. You want to get your bishop outside the pawn chain. So e3 is very much locking this bishop inside the pawn chain, and everybody gets an amber alert. Okay. It's going off in my pocket too. Okay, e3, locking this bishop inside the pawn chain, which is normally not ideal, right? Normally you want this bishop out here on f4, on g5, somewhere more active, right? But in this case, I play e3 anyways. So why did we break the rule here? Why are we allowed to block our bishop in? And I'm going to ask you this question, and I want you to think about it with this pawn on c5 versus this pawn on c6. What's different? Why are we okay with blocking this bishop in, depending on where this pawn is?
We're not really worried about bishop b4 anymore.
Okay, bishop b4, so that's not quite right. Not quite right. In fact, if we were worried about bishop b4, it's handy to have this bishop back here, right? It could potentially, block, defend some dark squares. Whereas, okay, let's say the pawn is on c6 and we're worried about bishop b4, then bishop b4 would be more of a problem if our bishop were outside the pawn chain on f4. With it on c1, it could help defend the dark squares. So not quite. Good idea, though. It's important to look at the differences. Yeah, so e3 does some good things, as the chat is pointing out. It defends d4, it opens up the light squared bishop. But the question is, why play e3 now? Why not play it after bishop g5 or something, which is maybe even the best move in this case? So the difference that I want to point out is that with this pawn on c6, there's no clear plan to activate white's dark squared bishop, right? With the pawn on c6, no matter where you put your dark squared bishop, it's not really going to get active unless you get f3, e4, which is pretty hard to achieve here, right? Whereas with the pawn on c5, we are pretty much always going to have this option to play d takes c5. So I'm okay with blocking in my bishop with e3 because I have a clear plan to activate my dark squared bishop. Now what is that plan? Well, I want to go b3, bishop b2, and take on c5, allowing my bishop to c on this open diagonal. And the bishop's actually going to be really well placed here, right? It's guarding the square in front of a potentially isolated d-pawn. It's on a long open diagonal, and it's going to be hard to oppose, hard to attack. So with this pawn on c5, it makes a lot more sense to play e3 than with the pawn on c6, because we have this clear plan to activate our bishop anyways. So why do I spend so much time on this? Well, it's important to point out when you break an opening principle, it's important that you have a very distinct and clear reason for it. You need a clear plan to activate your pieces if you're going to do something like e3. So that's the difference I was fishing for. Something to keep in mind. How can you change the structure? How can you activate your pieces depending on what your opponent has chosen to do? Okay, Vinee continues with knight to c6. Now we're very much back in normal territory. I just continue with bishop to e2. And I choose e2 over d3 here because the fight for the d4 square is sort of on, and I don't really want to get pinned with bishop g4. I want my knight to be able to defend here, my queen to be able to see this pawn as well. Black chooses bishop e7, just developing. I castle, black castles, and then of course I continue out with b3. So far so normal, right? We just have developed our pieces, gotten castled, and are getting ready to play the moves that we're planning to play. Now black plays h6. So what do you guys think about this move, h6? Good idea, bad idea? So there's two conflicting chat messages in the Twitch chat. One says some luft is good sometimes, so just saying, h6, it seems like a fine move, gives the king luft. Also, defends the g5 square, nothing can ever land there. Seems like, overall probably a positive change to black's position. And then the next chat message says, I think it wasted tempo, and someone else says, isn't h6 a wasted time? So that's the question. Can black afford to waste time here with something like h6? Now, whether or not it's a waste is up for debate, but is it the kind of position where black can take a tempo, play a move like h6, or did black have to play more quickly? Yeah, you think it's fine, right? I mean, it's not like h6 is creating horrible weaknesses or anything, right? I mean, you can argue it weakens the light squares slightly. Not a big deal in my opinion. But the fact of the matter is, black has actually played a very combative opening, right? We have tension in the center. Things can change in the center. Black has already weakened some central pawns. And when you do that with the black pieces, you have to play very quickly, quickly and with a sense of urgency. Because if you do this, if you make these pawns sort of vulnerable early on, and then you start spending time on moves like h6, moves that could have been spent developing your bishop, for example, or defending your center with something like b6, then things are going to start to drop. Because, you're allowed to play combatively like this with black, you have to be aware that you're running some serious risks if you do, right? White gets the first move. White is going to be the first one to start targeting these pieces. So h6 way too slow for an opening like the Tarrasch. Now, again, if you imagine this knight on d7 and this pawn on c6, very similar looking position. Now, in that position, I think h6 would be fine. I still think it's a little bit slow. We might be better off spending our time playing something like rook e8, but I think h6 would be fine there. There's no tension in the center. All white's going to do is try and get the pieces on normal-looking squares. So you can afford a move like h6. But with the pawn on c5, things are in tension in the center. There's pressure on d5, pressure on c5. You really can't be spending time on moves like h6. Okay. So I just go bishop b2. You don't need to try and refute your opponent's opening just because they played one slow move. You just want to play normal chess, and then you'll have a good position. Black plays bishop to f5, and I think this is also a little bit of a mistake here. F5 seems like a very active diagonal, but it turns out this bishop needs to be spent helping the center, supporting the center here. Again, black has made a lot of weaknesses in the center, and this bishop on f5, while it's active, doesn't actually help defend any of these weaknesses or advance black's play, really. So I think better squares are e6 or g4 here. These would both be normal squares. So why e6? Well, it's not hard to understand. You want to defend your d5 pawn, and this move actually kind of justifies h6, right? You want to stop knight g5 so you can play bishop e6, help defend your center. Bishop g4 is pretty similar. We want to maybe target d4, maybe prevent this knight from blockading a future isolated d-pawn. So bishop g4, very normal. Now bishop f5 on the other hand, this is only the second really weird move by black, but already black is in pretty deep trouble. So it's white to move here. See if you can apply a lot of pressure to black's position. We want to ratchet up the pressure. So again, we're thinking about ways to target this center. Black has extended very far. Ooh, lots of ideas. I love it. Love it when there's lots of ideas in the chat. What are we thinking in person, audience? What are we thinking? This knight? Yeah, knight e5? Is what you're thinking? Yeah. Yeah, okay. That's one. Any other moves spring to mind? So I want to say here, white's position is already really good. So a lot of the normal looking moves are going to be quite strong, but I like the move played in the game a bit better than the other ones.
Pawn captures.
Right, so dc5, I mean, you should always be thinking about the potential capture in the position, right? On every turn, when there's tension in the center, you need to be thinking, what happens if I take my opponent? And if you don't take your opponent, what happens if they take me next turn? You want to be looking at that change in structure on every turn, for sure. So one or two more ideas I want to see thrown out there before we move on. Any other ideas from the in-person audience?
Bishop d3.
Yeah, okay, so bishop d3, offering a trade of the bishops, or maybe we can activate these guys, right? Maybe rook c1. Right, so rook c1 is what I chose in the game, and I'll go into why. So knight e5 is a pretty reasonable move in a position like this, but I'm not sure it really helps us that much, right? Black, I don't know what we're trying to threaten with knight e5. Now, a move like d takes c5, I'm going to freely admit here, I think that white is much better in this position. You know, this d pawn is going to be weak. We have good control over d4. We can maybe reroute our knight to help blockade this pawn. And white's going to be better. Now, that being said, let's say I pass and black takes on d4. I think that white is even more better if black takes us. And it's not like if I don't take this pawn, it's going to be able to run away. So my thinking was, why would I, capture my opponent if it's better for me if my opponent captures me, right? I'm going to have this option later. And if black has to capture me, then great, I get to activate my pieces. All right, does it make sense how, while this is good for white, we have activated our opponent's bishop versus this position where our opponent has activated our own knight. And if one more trade happens, all of a sudden you start to get a little bit afraid of what's happening on this diagonal. So that's why I didn't want to go for d takes c5. Now again, I think d c5 is probably very good for white, as are many things. Now the moves that really stuck out to me here are knight a4 and rook c1. And these are the kind of moves that can be really powerful when you have tension in the center. When pieces are in tension, and it's good for you if your opponent takes, it's really nice to, like I said, ratchet up the pressure, add more attackers to those pieces in tension to sort of force your opponent's hand, force them to blink first and be the one to relieve the tension. So between knight a4 and rook c1, I liked rook c1 better because this knight's already doing something and this rook is not doing anything on a1. You always want to bring in more pieces. So rook c1 is my choice. My opponent sort of smelled the danger here. If you don't do anything, then I am going to actually play knight a4, and you will be forced to capture on d4, again, giving me that good position that I was looking for. So he tried b6, trying to defend the pawn with another pawn, preparing, if I capture, probably not to take back with the bishop, but instead to take back with the pawn and get this hanging pawn structure, where he's battling back for these central squares. Now, these positions are their own sort of animal, so I don't want to go into those just yet. But the point is here, white is already close to winning, I think. Close to winning. So white to move and continue to amp up that pressure. What's next? Okay, the chat's spotting some threats.
Bishop e5.
Yeah, bishop b5. Okay, you're spotting the same threats as the chat. So bishop b5 hits this knight, right? And then the other idea in the chat is, again, to go knight a4, or this idea that I didn't mention was also brought up of bishop a3. So between these three ideas, which of these is the most useful for us? Which one follows our previous play the best? Also, wow, thank you for the raid, Zephcat. I don't actually see that in the chat program that I'm using, but that's okay. Thank you, thank you. We're talking about the Trash Tarrasch tonight. Talking about this game in the Tarrasch. So one of these moves is far better than the other two.
Is it knight a4?
It is knight a4. So why knight a4 over these other options?
Well, it's obviously part of our plan because we were considering it last turn.
Mm-hmm.
But not only does it attack c5, it discovers rook c5.
Right. Number one, it increases the pressure on c5, exactly what we wanted to do. We wanted to ramp up the pressure, force our opponent into doing something with this pawn. Number two, it opens up both our bishop and our rook. Now, this is why it's better than bishop a3, because our bishop is already well placed here. It's on this long diagonal. Again, a long diagonal that we intend to open up at some point. So we don't really want to move it again to a3. Whereas our knight, it's now being very, very useful in ratcheting up the tension with these two pawns. That's what it's about in this opening. We want to make something happen here. Now, why is bishop e5 a bad move? Why is this one no good?
Could you just defend with the bishop? I mean, not the bishop, the rook.
Yeah, maybe the rook, right? So bishop b5 looks like it gains a tempo against the knight, but actually rook c8 is a very helpful move for our opponent, right? It defends the knight, and beyond that, it indirectly helps defend this c5 pawn. So this is sort of the opposite of what we wanted. Not only is it not increasing the tension against the pawn on c5, it's helping our opponent preemptively sort of defend against our ideas. So it's nice to look for tempo moves like bishop b5, but you have to play them with a purpose, right? We're not playing knight a4 because it makes a threat. We're playing knight a4 because it makes a threat that works with our plan. And also tactically, knight a4 is sort of just winning. So knight a4, and let's do a quick count here. So I've got 3 attackers, and you only have 2 defenders on your c5 pawn. And unfortunately for black, it turns out to be very, very difficult to defend this pawn again. Queen d6 isn't actually a real defender because the queen sort of blocks off the bishop. Really quickly, do you guys see the problem with knight to d7? Quick tactics, puzzle rush. Okay, maybe it's not quite as puzzle rush as I had hoped. Yeah, so d takes c5, right? And we discover the threat against the d5 pawn and capture this pawn. But now our opponent can, I guess, just go knight takes c5 and defend this one. But again, we are achieving a very favorable IQP here. This d pawn, in fact, is probably going to fall without too much more of a fight. If I can play some example moves here, maybe I'll embarrass myself, maybe I won't, but knight back to c3 might be quite strong. I think you have to play bishop e6. If you go knight b4, actually maybe you can just play knight b4. All right, hold on. I have to be careful here. I have to be careful. Oh, let's see what to do in this position. What to do? Maybe I cheat. Let's cheat. Okay, yeah, knight c3 and knight c5 are both good. Knight b4 is not a problem because we just go knight d4 or queen d4. Okay, it all makes sense. And you never go bishop f6 because the knight is hanging, and you never go knight here because I take and take. And you're in big trouble. Big, big trouble. So knight c5, no good. So knight d7, not going to do it. Queen d6, like I said, not going to do it. And what happens on knight to e4? Can you come up with any good move after knight to e4? So the knight, of course, is defending this pawn on c5. So we amped up the pressure, and our opponent ramped up the defense. Now, how do we continue? Again, we're playing very concretely. we have our idea. We want to increase pressure on c5, make our opponent do something with this pawn. How do we keep playing in that same vein? How do we keep it going? So this piece is well placed, this piece is well placed, and even this bishop is well placed, right? You got to be a little bit careful about this move, bishop a3. There might even be tactics that you have to look out for where pawn takes pawn might be discovering a threat. So I'm going to give you a hint here, not bishop a3. Our bishop's well placed on this diagonal. So what other pieces can we get involved?
Light square bishop.
Yep, so we're looking at these minor pieces, right? And these are the ones that are maybe feeling just a little bit left out.
Bishop d3.
Yeah, so bishop d3 is a great idea. So what is the point? What are you trying to do?
Get rid of the defender and then it's defending c5.
Yeah, exactly right. You're trying to remove this defender of the pawn on c5. This knight is defending. It's pretty much the last piece in our way before we can just win a pawn on c5. So you want to get rid of the knight. So that's the good idea in general. But now let's look at the specifics. Let's say black plays some move like bishop back to g6. Now, specifically, if you try to follow through with your plan, play bishop takes knight. Unfortunately, after pawn takes bishop, I think you actually just have, you lose a tempo here, right? Your knight gets attacked, you have to move the knight again. And after knight here, maybe now black has a tempo to try and save something. Maybe we go knight b4, and things start to get a little bit awkward on your d3 square. So there's some way that we can do the same idea of attacking the knight without losing that tempo, that critical tempo.
Knight d2.
Yeah, knight d2 is great. Not only does it remove this knight preemptively from this pawn that would be attacking it, but we're usually a little bit happier about trading off our knight for another knight rather than one of our bishops, right? This is our quote-unquote good bishop. It might not look like it's contributing much to this c5 business, but it's still a good piece. It's on active open diagonals. But knight d2 in the game is very direct, very straightforward, and I think it's correct here. You just attack the defender, and now this pawn on c5 is more or less dead. I think the computer says you have to play something like bishop f6 here and try to stay in the game like this, but I think you do still lose, end up losing a pawn. Let's see what happens. Let's see if I take and take. Let's just try taking everything. At the end of the day, your c5 pawn is still going to fall, right? You can try takes. Again, I'm just going to take. So bishop f6, still not going to be good enough. That was the computer's best try. Now if you go bishop d6, it's what my opponent did in the game. We're just going to do the exact same thing. Finally, we can just break through. We take off the defender, we take on c5, and take on c5, and now our opponent is in a very, very bad way. In a very bad way. And quick question from the chat, which is good to point out. I sort of glossed over this. They're asking, so this knight on f3 was useful to defend the d4 pawn, right? Now that we played knight d2, can black take here? But unfortunately for black, that does leave this knight on c6 behind. So again, another reason why bishop b5 might not be so good, because it induces our opponent to play a move that would help him defend down this c file. Whereas here, he has this problem on c6 already. But okay. Here we are in the game, and I think white is more or less totally winning here. I think maybe what my opponent missed is he was relying on having some sort of attack with these bishops sort of glaring down the board, but unfortunately this kind of idea just isn't ever really going to work. right? You can try some, glorious double bishop sacrifice, but I don't think it's going to get you anywhere, right? Like, I don't know, check, take, but you very quickly run out of things to do here. This bishop keeps this knight at bay, and you're attacking with just a queen. And at the very least, I can block you. Maybe I can even, be a hero and play king h3 and run you out of checks like this. So not going to be good enough for black. My opponent realized it and just took on c5, takes back. And now this is more or less just totally lost. So I'm going to fast forward through some of this game, kind of show you how we continued. So queen c1 attacked the knight. My opponent goes knight e5. I go queen to c3, putting on this kind of pressure here. f6, just rook to d1, putting pressure on d5. And then things very quickly sort of crumble for my opponent. Rook to d8, but now I actually have this nice little tactic to win the d5 pawn. Go f3, f4, drive my opponent's pieces back, and then I can actually just take on d5. Sorry for all the arrows. The point being that you get 2 rooks for the queen if you take on d5 back. But at the very end, I go bishop f3, and I'm actually winning in exchange. So would be winning material if you took on d5. Instead, my opponent went back to e7. We traded, and here I am just up 2 pawns. And yeah, the chat says resignable. Clearly, a player of my caliber would never mess up such a winning position with 2 bishops. But Vinee is nothing if not very resilient and very tough to keep down. I'm quite fortunate that I often get good positions against him in the opening, because if I didn't, I get the feeling my results might not be quite as convincing as they have been. So I'm not going to show you how things... I'm not going to show you everything here. We're going to skip forward a little bit. But there is actually a moment in this game where Vinee could have saved the position. So I'll quickly sort of zoom through. So after I did all the hard work, I felt like I won everything. I quickly played queen to d4, which is kind of just a blunder. Just allows this move queen to a5 when these 2 things are being threatened. And I wasn't sweating it too much. I can give this a pawn back without really spoiling anything. So I just go king f2. Vinee comes after me though, queen a2. I defend and attack. We get queen b1. We do some shuffling with the checks. Queen comes back to b1. And then I go bishop e6. So there are some kind of nasty tactics here. If you really try to do anything, let's just say you pass with h5. The idea here was actually to play this nice move f5. And the point is, if you capture, I can actually give check, taking advantage of the pin, and take the knight, and then you're basically checkmated here. If you check me, I can always come back, and I'm just up a piece. So facing this threat of f5, Vinee went bishop d3. Now I just improve my king with king to g3, stepping out of the second rank checks. Get queen to f1. And now, quick question for you guys. Should I go queen to e1, trading queens? Or should I do something else? Something that keeps the queens on, maybe e4, for example. Trying to go for this queen d8 check again. Or if not e4, maybe just a simple move like h3. Like let's say h3. So should I trade queens or should I not trade queens here? With my bishop pair.
Yeah, I mean, you have the bishop pair and you've got an extra pawn. That seems like a winning endgame.
Yep, that's exactly right. So, people talk about how strong the bishop pair is, and it might not be quite as well known. They actually are even more dominant in the endgame, in my opinion. They're very, very good in the endgame. It's very tough to play against the bishop pair in the endgame. They cover just huge swaths of the board, and tough to play against. So queen e1, definitely the simplest, the most practical move, and I think just the best move. So this queen is actually trapped, so we have to trade. Now my opponent goes about the process of untangling this knight. We get the check and bishop d5, and you can already see like every square in black's position is getting attacked by these bishops. Not a6, but the rest of these. My opponent goes a6. I go king to f3. Opponent goes f5. And then I realize I can make a passed pawn here, so I go ahead and do. So g4, g6, take, e4. And here my opponent says, okay, I'll go into this bishop versus knight endgame. So I saw this coming, and I thought that this one would be pretty easy to win. Turns out it kind of is, but there's a little bit of a danger here. And the danger is that I did kind of trade a lot of pawns to get here, right? I only have 3 pawns left. And in minor piece endgames, if you trade too many pawns, then eventually your opponent is just going to sacrifice the remaining piece for your last pawn, and it's going to be a draw, because you can't just checkmate with the bishop, right? So that was the danger here, and Vinee managed to get me to mess this up. So he goes knight e6, which is a bad move. He was in a little bit of time pressure. I just go bishop back to e3. Now Vinee actually does have to return back to d8. If you don't, otherwise f5 becomes very good with the bishop attacking the pawn on h6. So he comes back and plays h5, so he doesn't lose this pawn. He goes knight f7, and I bring my king towards the king side here. Go f6, king f5. He goes h4, trying to draw my king away from my f6 pawn. Just go bishop d4. I mean, so far so good. This is not too crazy stuff. Goes king to e6. And now I go bishop all the way back to a1 because I am good enough at chess to not hang this one, thankfully. So I go bishop a1, just getting my bishop out of the way. Goes knight to e4. And now I'm willing to say I make a pretty big mistake here. Pretty big mistake. So white to move and avoid black's tricky idea. So black has a very nasty idea here to try to make my life hard. And yeah, it's easy to make fun of Vinee for his knight e6, knight back to d8 maneuver, but it actually shows quite a lot of maturity at the chessboard. You know, not too many people are capable of just immediately admitting, no, wait, I was wrong. My knight doesn't belong in e6. I'm going back to d8. And that's actually quite a useful skill to be able to have. Just be able to say, no, I was wrong to go to e6. I understand knight d8 is the best I can do now. And just shamelessly go back. You know, just admit your wrongs and go about the business of correcting them. So someone in the chat has spotted black's trick. So how do you stop black's trick? So Christmas-tronic in the chat does have all the right ideas. So any ideas what black has up his sleeve here? This one's kind of tough. I mean, I missed it. So let's say you take the pawn, right? How can black potentially win one of our guys? One of our guys is in danger here. Now, it's not going to be knight f6, because we can always trade into this endgame. And this endgame's super, super winning, right? Black is going to have to deal with this pawn. In the meantime, we come take this pawn, and since we don't have a rook pawn on this side of the board, it's never even close. It just always wins. If this pawn were like on a3, sometimes there's crazy stuff, but I think even here that would be winning. So not knight f6, but he has some other idea in mind. And I actually took on h4 in the game. Any ideas? I think the chat has it. So black wants to go after the b pawn, right? But if he goes after the b pawn right away, then we're just going to play b4. And this is what I saw. And then I was thinking, now no matter what happens, worst case, I can always defend my pawn if I need to. And in the meantime, I'm just going to go here and start pushing this guy and win without too much of a fight. But my opponent can actually play this nasty move a5. And then after a5, my pawn is stuck. And it turns out there's absolutely nothing I can do to stop knight d2, knight takes b3. So of course, in this position, by far the simplest way to win is to play b4 here. Just not allow my opponent to play this a5 idea, and then I'm never not going to win. 3 pawns on the board is always going to be good enough here. But instead, we got this position. So I'm going to say my mistake here was not necessarily king takes h4. My mistake was not slowing down and calculating. And then to make matters worse, after I played king takes h4 and chess study got a little bit messed up. Yeah, and a5, I still didn't calculate for long enough. I had like 20 minutes on my clock at the very least, I think, so I had time to sit down and figure this out. But instead, I again moved a little bit too quickly and missed a drawing idea. So white to move here is actually only one way to win. And if you guys at home want to try to figure it out, you're welcome to pause here and calculate forever. I'm not going to try to make you guys answer this for the interest of time, and also because it's actually quite a difficult one. So in the game, I noticed that after knight d2, knight b3, my bishop on a1 was attacked, so I decided to play bishop to b2, just anticipating my opponent's idea and getting my bishop out of the threat of capture. And now what I was thinking is, knight d2, I'll step to g5, king f7, I'll go h4, you can take me. But once I got here in my head, I was like, okay, there's no way you're stopping this, right? There's no way you're stopping this. But unfortunately, it turns out you are. h5, knight c5, h6, you have the check. And then here, knight back to f8. And shockingly, this is a fortress. There's just no way through for white. I can attack your knight, and now you can come to h7. I think you can also come to g6, amazingly. I think you go to g6, and somehow I am unable to queen any of my pawns. Black is going to repeat with knight h8 to g6 forever and ever and ever, and there's nothing that I can do about it with white. Nothing I can do about it. I can play bishop f8, and you can't take, but you can just go knight back to h8, and then I'm in trouble. And if you try this, now the a pawn comes in handy, and it's actually, okay, wait a second. How did I achieve this? Okay, I go knight here first, then after queens. Now it's actually white who is losing the game. So really crazy drawing idea with that fortress against the f and h pawns. But after bishop b2, Vinee actually misses it and plays knight f2 check. So after all that, he faltered at the last second, and I did end up winning the game anyways. But the only move to win here is to just go king to g4, let black play this idea, and then the critical point is that we don't spend time saving our bishop here, we just go. You just go with h5. You don't have time to waste saving your bishop, otherwise this idea is going to be good enough to draw, so you just go h5. Knight takes here. I think we do have to defend our pawn. Now, if you don't go king f7, I go king g6, and I still just go h6. So for example, if you try to bring the knight back, you are nowhere close to being in time. And I queen. Okay, maybe I don't go to that square, actually. I go to this square. No, I lied. Which square do I go to? I go to this square, and then I queen, so there's no forks. And if you go king f7, again, I push and push. If you try king g8, come here. And again, not going to be good enough. Not going to be good enough. So I still had a way out after a5, but I did not find it. But then my opponent didn't punish me, went knight f2 instead. And then this is not so hard. I just come take this guy at the very least. I can push this guy. Multiple ways to win here. And Vinee ended up resigning. So pretty tough game overall. Got a huge opening advantage using these critical ideas of keeping the tension, adding pressure in the position. That was the main takeaway from the opening. Whenever you have pawns in tension like this, like these pawns on c5 and d4, where it's bad for either side, kind of bad for either side to capture, white can always actually just take and be a little bit better. A really useful idea is this point of adding tension to the pawn. So rook c1, adding tension, knight a4, adding tension, and then eventually black's position just crumbles. You just can't handle all the pressure on c5, and immediately out of the opening, it's actually like +3, +4 here. Like white is just entirely winning after taking on c5. So do you guys have any questions on this game or that kind of crazy endgame that got featured? Questions about what happened here? Anything? Kwan says that was a nice game. That was one of the better ones for me of the tournament, even though I did blunder at the very end. But had some fun games this tournament for sure. Okay, well, with that, we've got about 10 minutes left. Why don't I show you a little bit of a puzzle from the dreaded last round. So I was playing black here, and I just needed, again, with a win in this game, I am St. Louis Open champion, go home in glory, take the first place prize, but couldn't do it. So just for a change of pace, why don't we play a little game where you try to checkmate me? Okay, so we're going to just ignore everything that happened in this game. That's fine. So here we have this position. My opponent correctly finds rook takes d4. So now who can tell me what's wrong with knight takes d4? Any ideas? Let's start with this one. First little puzzle for you. This was a very, very tactical game. And while you're thinking, Padelka in the chat says, was it better to not trade off the bishop for the passed pawn? I mean, you can definitely just play the position with the two bishops there. But I mean, the endgame with that passed pawn is pretty clearly winning. It's just that I messed it up. So sort of 6 in one hand, half dozen in the other. Both endgames are totally winning. I chose to go for the one with the passed pawn. So Georgi in the chat has the crazy idea. You actually go queen f2 here. And this is what I was relying on to save my skin here. I can go queen f2, get these queens off the board. And then amazingly, in this endgame, I think black is just winning. We first go c3. Now you don't have time to bring your king back because c2 is unstoppable. The rook cannot defend. So you have to take, or you have to go rook d1. Let's say you take. Now I go c2. Can't go to c4. Oh, but you can check, actually. Wait a second. So maybe I don't go c3. Maybe I go a3. Yeah, probably I go a3. Okay. And let's say rook d1. Now c3, king g2, a2, king f2. Wait a second. What's happening here? Oh my goodness. All right. What's going on in this endgame? Am I crazy? Okay. White is completely winning in this endgame. Never mind. Am I losing it? Okay, queen e4 check apparently is a draw here. So I hadn't actually checked this one with the engine yet, but I thought that this endgame was actually good for black, but it turns out white is in time by a tempo, it looks like. So never mind, ignore all that. White played this move, rook d4, which I thought was simpler. Probably good, probably good. So why rook d4 instead of knight d4? Well, now there's no queen f2 because you are stopping me, right? So, okay. So I go knight takes d4. We get knight takes d4. And now, of course, if I take here, white's going to go queen h6. And I'm in big, big trouble. So I don't take there. I go check and g5, allowing my queen to come back into the game. So white plays this move, queen to h6. And I play this nice little tricky idea of queen to h7. So here I actually thought that maybe I had saved myself a little bit. So what's going on here? Who can find what's going on here? White to move. Quan says you thought it worked. I also thought it worked. I also surprised myself there once I put it on the board. So yeah, it's white to move and find a very, very rude way to win. Very rude, very mean.
I just take on h7 and play f5?
Close. Close. So take on h7 is option number 1, and take on g5 is option number 2, right? So you have to decide which is the way to go here. So if you take and go f5, I think I just take. And this endgame, I'm a little bit more confident about not being so bad for me, because now I'm only down a knight instead of a full rook. And I've got my own rook to play with. I don't think these pawns are exactly queening right away, right? So something a little bit more convincing than that.
Queen to g5, and then probably rook to h2, whatever happens.
Yeah, so queen g5, and then here's my big trick. Here's my big trick. So if I go queen to g6, I agree that I think white is just winning. You just take this guy. You can take e6, or even, yeah, I think you just take e6, and it's like you're just totally busted here. These pawns queen faster than black's pawns are going to queen. So I can't go queen g6, but what I can do is king h8. Crazy idea, and then your queen is actually trapped. I did it. I trapped your queen. You go rook h2, go rook g8. And this is what I was hoping for. This is what I was hoping for, actually. And I think if this has happened, maybe I'm not in so much trouble. Maybe. I don't know. Let's ask. Let's ask. I've been wrong before. Yeah, no, still totally busted. Always losing. Always losing. Turns out white is even winning this endgame, but only if you find knight c2 here. Tough. Okay, but this would have been a better try for me than what happened in the game. So, with that in mind, not queen takes g5, but instead, what can we do? What can we do here? It's actually going to be checkmate in like 7 moves maximum. So no one has found the key move. Yeah, okay.
h7, knight c6.
There you go.
And then I'm going to go
That's the
e7,
way.
and then I'm going to try to back rank you or put my rook on h2 that way.
Yep, knight to c6. And it's just totally dead. Just totally dead here with black. This is somehow like a massive mating net. Like I can run with my king out this way. I can run with my king out this way. But every square is just going to be covered, and I'm just entirely boxed in, and this is just checkmate. This is like checkmate in 3. Like there's nothing to do. In the game, I tried giving a check, but just king g4, and now of course after takes, just knight to c, or sorry, not knight c6, but we can go check, knight c6 or knight e7, and checkmate. Nowhere to go. If I had tried running with my king, then amazingly, knight to e7, and every square on the f file is covered, and I have to go to the h file, and no matter where I go, this is mate in 1. Really, really tough stuff. And king g8, same story. I mean, you can take the rook first of all, but you can actually just also do this. Actually, no, you can't. I lied. But you can go rook h2 here, and same story. Just go knight e7 next. And it's dead. It's just dead. So I got destroyed. unfortunately. So nice find, by the way. This knight c6 move, I entirely missed it in the game. I thought my opponent was just going to like do something dumb, like take on g5 or something, maybe play king g4, and I was going to like take here, and it was going to be a fight. But no such luck. Just knight c6 and nothing to do but resign. Nothing to do but resign. So I think that's just about all I have for you guys here today, but I have exciting news. We have a brand new Grandmaster in residence for you guys today, Romain Edouard, who is French, but came here all the way from Spain. So pretty fun. We're happy to have him in St. Louis. It's the first person we've had from overseas in quite some time. And Romain's a great one to start with. So hopefully you guys enjoy his first lecture. As always, I want to thank you all very much for joining me here tonight. Thank you for watching. My name is Caleb Denby, and I will see you guys next time.